Resin is the core foundation to the world of Withersworn, evolving it from a standard medieval setting to a high fantasy one. Similar to our own history with the use of steam or electricity, resin is a resource discovered within the kingdom thousands of years ago that vastly changed the world. When consumed or used as a conduit, resin can extend one's life and bring out innate supernatural abilities and physical strength, but not without a cost. Autopsies and mere observation have determined that with the more resin use, the more one's body is affected. These start internally at first, with traces of coagulation found in the user's bloodstream. As repeated use is engaged, the eyes will turn a bright golden yellow. Many refer to those with such stature as resin-mancers, and the effects are irreversible. While most desiring sanity try to stay within this threshold, many, both willing and unwilling, are naturally drawn to heavier consumption as the power is intoxicating. Higher class society generally opt to dedicating further use with only conduit objects, which don't affect their body or mind unless specifically made to do so. Those desperate or soldiers conscripted in combat are often forced to indulge past this, as their alternative would likely be death. With further use, the skin begins to darken and crust, twitching and muscle spasms may occur. But strength oddly seems to increase exponentially in this stage despite the physical deformities. Resin continues to build up in the circulatory system with more noticeable growth on the brain, spine, and heart. At this stage it takes a much stronger toll on the mind. Hallucinations and delusions periodically trigger, especially in areas with heavy resin reservoirs. However, this is an expected side effect to resin use, and many welcome the strength and intrusive thoughts as a blessing. While many debate this state, some calling it insanity and others enlightenment, both often agree it is not wise to pass this point. Doing so will push the body beyond its limits, deteriorating to calcified flesh, growing bubbling resin boils, and loss of reality with increased aggression. Those who unfortunately reach this stage vary in name depending on region, but the formal term is known as the extinguished. Extinguished are often killed or outcast from society, and left to fend for themselves in the wild where they don't often last too long. Some who end up finding high quantities of resin to gorge upon end up metamorphosizing into something far more dangerous. A resin wraith, which is more horror than human. Their mental connection to resin is so strong they can even enter the minds of other resin users. It's not entirely known how the mental connection of resin works, but those who use it describe it as if you were to never had a certain sense, and suddenly gain the ability to do so. As if the resin can simply understand your thoughts, the more you engage with it. Like learning a new language, you become more familiar and quick with its use, and unlock more vocabulary. With High King Ymir reigning for over 1,000 years through resin, and the omnipotent archangels all fighting off the terrors of the Withering, this connection has become a widespread faith in the kingdom. Though there are great dangers with overindulgence, resin has been refined over the centuries into a more safe consumption over its older, more volatile usage. In more recent years it has led the kingdom into a golden age, advancing technology and society while harnessing the power and tools over people. Resin comes in many forms, which all have their own effects and uses. It is most commonly found in its raw form within trees, plants, or scavenged off corpses of resin users. Hard not to miss with its vibrant, yellow appearance. In the thicker, raw or liquid substance, it has a more powerful effect, but takes a heavy toll on the body and mind as previously described. These are regulated in most regions due to their invasive effects, and handled through the governing nations, yet many occult use it despite this. Crystal resin is found deeper within the earth, used for religious purposes or healing, and as wards in towns to keep back the Withering. It became a beacon of the faith as areas where angels roam, and sites of sacred heroes have heavy reservoirs, and it seems to have a greater effect in repelling the Withering. Of all resin forms, the crystal is the least invasive for permanent changes. and will only have noticeable benefits when within its aura or contact. As resin has an innate connection with the mind, able to harmonize with other resin sources, alchemists have experimented with pressurized amber casings for objects. When held or fused, some properties are transferred, but as to the unexpected nature of the art, it is either forbidden or done in secret for most regions. For example, an eye would be placed inside for sight, or to interrogate someone they may encase their head in amber to invade their mind. Resin mancers, soldiers, scholars, and the elite often forge conduits to harness small fractions of resin's power in a device or object. These lose the mind connection unless specifically made to do so, and instead focus on resin's powerful potential. Most established resin mancers adorn themselves with enchanted markings, scarring their flesh with heated crystals which leaves an illustrious glowing inscription. They also adorn themselves with charms, polished stone from crystals, carved dice from resin trees, and armor or jewelry to keep a permanent crystal infusing or around them. In more recent times, weapons and medicine have been developed, and no resin mancer is found without an assortment of bombs or potions. After High King Emir united the 7 nations from over a millennia of war, and had put in defense and funding for resin research, technology started to see fast progression. Large cities and factories were built to facilitate its use, with institutes specifically dedicating vast resources to furthering resin knowledge. From this, and partially thanks to old occult rituals, discovery of how to create artificial life began. Within the center of a resin mancer's brain, a bright, shiny core scholars call the resin core, or resin soul, was found to be able to transfer to non-human entity hosts. This core seems more capable the more resin the subject had taken in, with the new host being very docile and open to suggestion and programming. These new entities seem to have no recollection or any data suggesting they transfer any memory or form of previous self. A majority of the time these don't even speak or respond to instruction, unless the core donor had wraith-like levels of resin exposure. Evidence suggests this is possible due to the connective aspects of resin, and an outstanding similar behavior is that these constructs seem to acknowledge each other on a deeper level. Resin mancers seem to be able to also communicate with them, not directly through a spoken language, but the constructs seem to follow their directions more easily. While the Withering will get covered in its own video, it should be noted that as much as resin has helped advance the kingdom, the Withering has always been nipping at its heels. A dark purple and black ooze, it also penetrates the mind, but far more aggressively, and can corrupt creatures and people into dark entities. Resin seems to be effective at thwarting the blight, but at the same time the Withering will seek it out as well. With the heavy toll resin can take on many, High King Emir wished to invest technology into a defense weapon that could harness resin without the negative effects. As many believe Emir to be a chosen divine of resin, they experimented with his blood and the angels to create the Withersworn Project to combat the Withering horrors. The Withersworn Project was successful and created an elite order of knights called Withersworn, who can harness resin at a potential unlike any have seen before. Thank you for watching this brief history of resin and Withersworn. Please leave a comment on what lore topic you would like to see covered next, and I'll see you next time.